films that are hitting theaters this weekend. The first of which is the third Hellboy film, but the first in a newly rebooted series. The studio is hoping that hits the theater on Friday. The first two were directed by Guillermo del Toro, and full disclosure, I actually have not seen those two films. So this Hellboy, the 2019 version, is the first cinematic version of Hellboy that I've actually seen. Not that I think that you have to have seen the del Toro versions, but I also think it's useful for you to know where I'm coming from as I'm judging the film. This version of Hellboy is directed by Neil Marshall with a screenplay by Andrew Cosby, and recast David Harbour from Stranger Things and many other movies and TV shows as Hellboy, the creature from hell, birthed to the earth to fight the paranormal, but prophesied potentially to cause great destruction among the inhabitants of the planet Earth. He ends up fighting Mila Jovovich's resurrected Blood Queen, along with Ian McShane as his father, Daniel Day Kim and Saoirse Lane as members of his team. And Hellboy, this version at least, starts out very audacious, but in a way very self-aware. There's a bit of a wink and a nod as the movie starts. The movie knows that it's covering a lot of ridiculous things, that it's telling you a lot of ridiculous things, and I was actually on board with it for the first half hour or so. I dug the vibe a bit. I liked David Harbour's performance as Hellboy, and there are really no bad performances in the film. I can't fault any of those. And right around to the point where Hellboy is fighting giants and doing all kinds of crazy things, I was on board with it. But after about half an hour, Hellboy takes what I can only describe as a slow descent into absolute madness and chaos. As a matter of fact, Hellboy is one of the most incomprehensible theatrical experiences I've had in my lifetime. Now, some would argue that this is what the movie's going for. After all, it is about chaos. It is about demons and mystical beings rising from the earth, rising from different realms and sowing chaos and destruction across the earth. And as I said, it does start off with that kind of vibe. But eventually, the movie shows really the only thing that I could describe as absolute contempt for the art or the form of telling a story, or really the concept of a narrative in general. By the end of Hellboy, it is throwing things at you at such a rapid pace with so little explanation or even an attempt at threading it all together that you're either going to go with it and just let it wash over you, or you're going to sit there absolutely numbed by the sheer amount of what this movie is doing. I fell into the later camp. I think it is an absolute narrative disaster. By the end of this movie, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't care what the hell was going on. And the movie just absolutely defeated me with the number of things it was throwing for no rhyme and with no purpose or reason other than let's just throw another thing on the screen. It was absolutely, completely unfocused, did not tell a story, didn't even come close to telling a story. And I know that there are different kinds of films, and films tell stories in a lot of different ways, but I think that there is a certain, at least basic structure to actually trying to make a cohesive narrative flow to a film that this movie doesn't have. Instead, it favors just throwing as much stuff on the screen as it possibly can in 2 hours before sprinting to the finish line with another end credits tag that's just as incoherent as the rest of the movie. There are going to be some people, I'm sure, that love this movie for a lot of reasons. And there are a lot of things to like in this movie. As I mentioned, the performances. If you're a fan of splatter, gore, and blood effects, Hellboy takes full advantage of its R rating, and there is so much blood and so many intestines and so much viscera on the screen that I'm not a person that minds that, but by the end, even I was completely over it. Just the fact that by the end, there's so much, and it goes so far over the top. And yes, there are people who love that approach, who connect with that approach. That speaks to them, and they're probably going to love this movie. It was not my kind of movie. I found it absolutely a mind-numbing experience. I did not enjoy it. I do not think it was a very well-told story. And it's a shame because I think that there were a lot of really good pieces in place, but Hellboy completely ejects the concept of starting a franchise by actually creating characters and storylines that we care about in favor of throwing as many different things on the screen as they possibly can. and that approach just doesn't work for me. I think they did, to paraphrase The Simpsons, I think they did the funny parts serious and the serious parts funny. The movie was being laughed at in the screening that I was in with some fellow critics. Not with, although I think some people perhaps were laughing with it in their own certain way, but by the end of it, I was laughing not because I was entertained or because I found it humorous. I was laughing because I was sort of incredulous at what was unfolding on the screen. So Hellboy is not going to be a recommendation for me. In fact, I found it kind of arduous to get through, with the caveat, though, that it is so out there and so crazy and so absolutely insane that I'm sure that there are going to be some people who see it and absolutely love it. If you want to take the risk, if you want to decide for yourself if that's the person that you are, that's up to you, but it was not a movie that resonated with me, and as a matter of fact, not an experience that I would look forward to reliving anytime soon. Another film that is opening this weekend is sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum from Hellboy. Universal's Little, their latest comedy to hit the screen. Directed by Tina Gordon Chisholm, it stars Regina Hall as Jordan Sanders, a tech expert who is an absolute nightmare to work for, terrorizes her entire staff, not least of all her assistant April, played by Issa Rae. Jordan's world changes when she wakes up one morning to find herself transformed back into her adolescent self, and that self is played by Marseille Martin. And she's not just the star of this movie, she's also an executive producer. So no matter what I thought about the movie, a tip of the cap and hats off to Marseille Martin, who is absolutely crushing it at such a young age. You probably have also seen her on the TV show Blackish. Little actually has quite a few laughs in it. I laughed several times in the movie, which is good considering that it's a comedy. Where I think it fell a little short for me is the length, the editing, and the pace. Comedy is all about timing, and even though I laughed several times throughout the duration of the film is also 1 hour and 50 minutes. So a lot of those laughs were interspersed with a lot of sequences that I didn't think quite fit the flow of the movie, didn't quite fit into the narrative of the film overall. And sometimes I did find those laughs to be a little few and far between. So it's hard for me to wholeheartedly recommend Little because I do feel that there are a lot of scattered threads that derail the overall story. There are some tonal issues. Parts of it are sort of a heartwarming family film. Parts of it are sort of, you could almost see what the R-rated version of this would be, in the sense that you are putting in the character of Jordan, you're putting a grown woman into a small child's body. And a lot of times they ride that line between, you know, what you can do with a kid, particularly her interactions with her teacher and the men in her life. You could see the way that they could skew a little more adult with that. They mix those tones. Sometimes that tonal mix works. Sometimes the tonal mix doesn't. I think that if the film had been refined a little more, chopped down a little more, both in the script stage and in the editing room, if you could have gotten it from 1 hour and 50 minutes down to maybe 1 hour and a half, and kept the laughs intact that are already in the film, you would have had a really solid comedy. As it is, even though I liked a lot about Little, I can't recommend it by just that much. However, there are laughs to be had. I would certainly recommend it before I'd recommend that you go see Hellboy. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a film that found an audience, if you chose to go see it and you enjoyed it. I would certainly understand that. The pacing issues, the length of the film, and the scattershot nature of the laughs are just enough to keep me from recommending it. But at the same time, I still think that you might enjoy it if you choose to go see it. So those are two of the movies hitting theaters this weekend. Did you see Hellboy? Did you see Little? What did you think? As always, I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments below. And stay tuned here on Screen Junkies News. We always have the latest news and reviews for everything coming out this week and beyond. Till next time, thanks for watching.